Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we'll be talking about a unit combo in Age of Empires 2 that is absolutely insane. It's also a unit combo that is not very well known. A lot of people do know about it, but not a lot of people know how strong it is as well. The unit combo I'm talking about is the Paladin plus the Halberdier. Now this composition, the Halb Paladin, goes kind of against conventional unit composition theory, which is to have one range unit and one melee unit, because that is usually the best way for units to fight in Age of Empires. However, this is a very special case. It is a unique case where double melee unit actually achieves more than a melee unit plus a range unit. But before we understand how strong the Halb Paladin is, it's important to understand why and in what situation we're going to need it. So starting things off, the Paladin is a really polarizing unit in 1v1. A lot of people hate it because it's way too expensive, takes long to research, and burns through your gold. But on the other hand, a lot of people love it because the Paladin is an amazing unit, and it's one of the strongest, most well-rounded units in the entire game. And that is even including unique units, by the way. So merging these two opinions, we can understand that the Paladin is a very big win condition when you have gold, but then as soon as you run out of gold, you can't produce the Paladin anymore. You've already invested so much into the upgrade, and it could be really hard to win the game. So by understanding this concept, we know that if we do decide to go for Paladin, we have to end the game relatively fast. We are naturally putting ourselves on a timer if we do go for Paladin in a 1v1, which is mainly what this video is about. In team game, you can spam Paladin, go for trade, and you don't need Halberdier, you can just go pure Paladin since you don't run out of gold. But for the 1v1s, we can't just go pure Paladin in a lot of cases because our opponent will easily put out counter units and we have to deal with those counters, or else we're going to run out of gold too quickly. So why even bother with Halb Paladin? Well, let's think about the other combinations of Paladin first. If we're up against mass Halberdier, then it's pretty easy to counter. You go Paladin, your opponent goes mass Halb but nothing else. It's a pretty weak response because then you can just switch to Hand Cannoneer or Arbalest or pretty much anything that deals with Halbs like Skirms, and you're going to be more than fine against Halbs. So the Paladin would just run around, kill the economy, and the Hand Cannoneer can push with the Trebs, and the Halb player is dead. Okay, let's think of a better response than just mass Halb. The opponent goes for mass Halb plus Arbalest or Halberdier plus Cavalry Archer. This is now a very good response to Paladin, and so usually the Paladin player will go Paladin plus Skirm. Skirm is okay against Halb and pretty decent against Arbalest and heavy CA, so it's a decent combination. But the problem is most Paladin civilizations do not have fully upgraded skirmishers. Some of them do, but some of them don't, and it could be really hard to tech into both at once, because remember, you need to go Paladin and then also get all the upgrades on the Skirm line from Fletching all the way to Bracer, Ballistics, Chemistry, and Elite Skirm. Plus you need to go for ranges, so it's a pretty big transition, and considering you don't have all the upgrades in most cases, it can be a little bit awkward. Although it is still a good response to Halb, Arbalest, and Halb CA. But there's another unit that counters Paladin that we haven't talked about yet, which is the Heavy Camel. What do we do if the guy just goes Heavy Camel in response to our Paladin? Paladin don't really trade too well into Heavy Camel since the Camel costs less resources overall and especially less gold, which is the problematic point in this situation. We also haven't talked about a really good composition against Paladin, which is Heavy CA or Mangudai, for example, plus Hussar. This combination dies against Paladin in open combat, but if you just decide to hug castles and raid with Hussar while holding the Paladin's push with the CA, and you can snipe Trebs with either Bomber Cannon or Hussar, you'll realize that the Paladin player has a really hard time cracking this composition. So what is the solution? How do we beat Hussar CA composition and camels? Well, the answer is of course Paladin Halb combo. This combo is insane. The idea behind it is that we can go for a double transition that is really quick, doesn't cost a lot of gold since we're going to be splitting into half Paladin and half Halberdier, and it is a dive composition, meaning we will run at our opponent, dive him with all our army, and follow up with 4 or 5 Trebs in the back to kill castles. We don't even give him a chance to snipe our Trebs because we're going to be diving him under his castles every single time and only protecting our Trebs with a few Halberdier, which is really good against the Hussar CA or the camels. So the way this works is by using the Halb's high damage plus the Paladin's tankiness and decent damage output to shred your opponent's army in melee combat. We want to burn through their meat shield as fast as possible and then get our Paladin to jump on their squishy backline, which could be CA or Arbalest or whatnot, and use our Halbs to melt the front line, which is either Hussar or camels. In practice, this looks like this. 30 Halb and 30 Paladin will engage. They might have 30 camels and even 30 heavy CA if they're on double gold comp. And what ends up happening is that the Halbs and the Paladin will engage. The camels will melt way too fast for the CA to really capitalize on the DPS. And then the CA will be exposed to Halberdier and Paladin, and the CA will have to run back because they just simply can't stand there and take damage from the Halbs, which actually have a bonus damage if they get up close, and the Paladin, which do a lot of damage. And so naturally, your opponent can't really fight you head on and they have to camp their castles. But this is where the 5 treb option comes through, and while we're diving our opponent with our army, we are killing castle after castle. So notice how you don't necessarily have to win the fight, we just have to push our opponent off of his castle, kill the castle with our trebuchets, and then move on to the next one. We do this until all our gold is run out, and we hope that by that point we've killed all our opponent's castles and exposed him to raids in the late game. This gives us a massive advantage in late game because we'll still have our castles up and our opponent will not have that luxury to defend against our raids. This composition will easily destroy single unit compositions as well. If our opponent is on only CA, for example, that is a terrible comp against Halb Paladin because the Halberdier and the Paladin will run up really close and the CA player can't shred all the Halbs in time and they're gonna have to run back. They're never going to be able to just stand still and shoot because the Paladin are going to be chasing them, and so that clearly doesn't work. The camels alone will easily melt to the Halbs and the Paladin can be used as a supporting unit or as a raiding unit in this case, and so clearly our opponent is left with the only option of mixing in either camels and CA or Hussar and CA, and even in those cases they might not be able to hold our Halb Paladin because they have to continue running while we just patrol and fight. And the really good thing about the Halb switch with Paladin is that you don't need all the upgrades of a different unit. You just need infantry, barracks, and the Halb upgrade, or pike and Halb. You already have the attack upgrades which work with the Paladin, so you see how you get a faster transition than if you were to switch it to skirms. This also solves the Paladin's biggest weakness, which is not having a supporting unit when up against camels. Usually if your opponent's on camels, and to be honest, before I knew about this composition, I would try to just use my Paladin to break the camels and hope that I can overpower him before he gets enough of them, but this was a really bad strategy as the guy going camels plus a few CA or Arbalest would just be able to easily outlast me. However, if you go Halb and Paladin, the Halberdier will easily shred the camels before the Arbalest and the CA have the time to shred the Halbs, and this is the whole purpose of the strategy. Keep in mind it has some weaknesses though. Halb and Paladin do, suffer from the fact that they're both melee units, and so if your opponent is smart and uses their walls to their advantage, yes, you can snipe castles, yes, you can break walls slowly with your trebs, but they could really utilize those choke points to whittle down your Paladin and starve you out of gold. If they also combine this tactic with some Hussar raids or some light cavalry raids to your economy while you're trying to set up your push, that can be really problematic. It can slow down your push, it can distract you, and it can also hurt your economy directly, which is a really big problem when you're trying to set up a deathball push. Also, we have a natural problem whenever playing Paladin, even with the Halb Paladin situation, is that we will eventually run out of gold. Halb Paladin will save you more gold than just the Paladin by itself, since you're going to be mixing the units, one of them which costs no gold but still puts out a really big damage. So you're going to have a little bit longer lasting gold than just pure Paladin, but the gold will eventually run out, and when the gold runs out, it can be problematic because you're going to have to switch into like Hussar or Light Cav, and you can still go for the Halb, but it might not cut it because the Light Cav is just not as strong pound for pound as the Paladin, and so it could be a cheap alternative for raiding but not as effective in the fights. So the fights can start going your opponent's way if he keeps his CA alive in the backline and can just easily start shredding you out when you're out of gold, so you can't make Paladin, which could be a really big downside to this combination. The last thing to note about the Halb Paladin combo is that you don't need to only push in one side as well. Because Halberdiers are so expendable, we can use our Paladin as a reindeer unit and then just spam Halberdier near our trebs and just patrol into our opponent while our trebs are hitting his castle. And if he doesn't have a unit that can deal with trebuchets like bomber cannon from a distance, he's gonna have to run his cavalry into our Halbs to take out our trebs, and if he has to do that while dealing with the Paladin raids, it can be extremely hard to survive. And remember, this push is lightning fast. As soon as you get the Paladin tech and the Halb tech, you're right away diving your opponent, just running under his base. You've got the trebs going forward, you're pushing with castles if you need to, so if your opponent makes even one mistake or needs a couple more minutes to get his army set up or to think what to go for, he is dead because this combination will kill so fast. Overall, I've been really loving playing with this composition myself, and I've been finding it really hard to deal with when my opponent goes for it. It's an extremely strong strategy, especially on maps like Arena, where one push can easily decide the game since you're backed up into a corner, and if the guy starts taking your front, you have no space to even recover and can easily die to the Halb Paladin strength. That being said, it can be played on any map where you can use that mobility advantage plus the raw power and fights advantage to dive your opponent, split them up, and take them out before you run out of gold. Overall, be cautious when playing for Paladin. You will run out of gold eventually, so make sure you end the game before the gold runs out, and if you can't end the game, at least put yourself in a really good position. Kill all their castles, get all the relics, start taking their gold and stone as well for yourself to keep fueling your Paladin. Using those techniques, you can outlast your opponent and kill them before gold is a really big issue and before you have to switch into something else. Thank you so much for watching. This is going to do it for this video. I hope you guys found it informative. Let me know if you guys have been facing Halb Paladin at all in your games. Let me know if you even knew about this composition all in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And as always, make sure to check me out in my links like Twitch for live streaming and Patreon for extra guides and build orders if you guys are interested. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys guys next time. Peace.